Welcome to our first webinar of a three-part series on transition topics for students with autism spectrum disorder. The first webinar is about what families and students need to know. So who are we? You will hear two people on this. I am Shaloni Winston, Executive Director of a chapter of the ARC in New York State. It's called Lexington. The most important role I fill, however, is that of a mom of a daughter, young lady who has Turner syndrome and who has nonverbal learning disabilities. I'll share some of our experience as well throughout this presentation. Joining me today is Nancy Desando. She's the Director of Innovations and Community Supports at Lexington. Between us, we bring over 60 years of experience in supporting people with disabilities, including students on the spectrum. While we have supported young adults in transitioning from high school to college careers and independent living for 60 years, we recently launched a program that specializes in this area in a big way. We have called the program Transitions, and later on we'll talk about how the parts and pieces of this program come together to support students from different angles and directions. So what are the objectives of this webinar? First and foremost, we know that young adults with autism often struggle with attending college or getting a job. Families want to support them but don't always know how to, nor do they have the time or resources to do that. Well, that doesn't change the fact that young adults want to have the same independence, the same life, like their friends, but they may not know how to succeed. And when they don't succeed and they have failures, it affects their self-esteem. So what we want to share today, what our objective of this webinar is to share some of the strategies that have resulted in a successful transition of the young adults that we have supported. We're going to talk to you both from the perspective of an organization which has supported them, but also as a parent. When you hear these strategies, it can often be overwhelming. So we're also going to talk to you about how to prioritize the areas that are important in preparing these young students. Again, we're going to talk to you from the perspective of an organization as well as from a parent. So this is my daughter. She's the inspiration behind the Transitions program. My daughter is 22 years old. As I mentioned, she's diagnosed with Turner syndrome, nonverbal learning disabilities, and ADHD. I use her as an example because the support she needed were very similar to those for the students on the spectrum in our program, and also because I can share with you how I supported her as a mom. Upon graduation from high school, she was academically very strong. You can see from the slide, she was 5th in her class. She had many awards. She had received scholarships from all the colleges that she had applied to. She had a job. She's very friendly, very kind and respectful. She wanted to be an international lawyer. But from my perspective as a parent, I was concerned. I knew that academically she could handle whatever came her way. But I also knew that going away to college, being in the dorms, she'd be vulnerable to bullying and she'd be vulnerable to the social situation in a dorm. She may have difficulty taking care of all the things that she needs to do. And those things, even though she was academically strong, they would have effect on her academics. Most importantly, I was afraid that even though she thought that that's what she wanted, that she would be unhappy, and I feared for her safety in the dorms. So what do we do? She needed supports that simply are not available at a college setting. So she and I moved into an apartment near the college she had chosen. And although I didn't necessarily tell her this, I became her coach. With coaching, she gradually has learned to manage her challenges in executive functioning and social skills, and it continues to be something she works on. But coaching didn't really begin there. The mom in me has to tell you how important it is to get your son or daughter used to using these tools at an early age to stay organized. So I want to share with you a tool that my daughter uses, and I've helped her develop learning how to use this that can help other students. So here's an example of a tool I used with her, and she still uses to assist her with her executive functioning challenges. For those of you unfamiliar with the term executive functioning, it essentially refers to a person's control of working memory, reasoning, task flexibility, problem solving, planning, and execution. So in the real world, executive functioning challenges can be addressed through training and tools that strengthen and assist with that control. For example, working memory, planning, and execution are supported with this simple table of tasks that she and I put together every Sunday. In the electronic world, we use Google Tasks to manage everything she has to do. When she started college and this tool was new to her, I provided her more supports, and as time went on, she started doing that herself. So now it's become part of second nature to her. When you look at specifically the tasks, they address all the critical areas of her functioning: independent living, academic, work, and social. If you look at some of the tasks, it says do emails and voicemails and messages. It's a reminder that she has to make sure that all of those things that are coming into her phone or her computer, she tracks them. There's a note in here that says send Viber note to I. I is our language for grandma. So it's a social thing to remind her to keep in touch with her family. There's another note in here about setting up medications. When you're living independently, that's very important to focus on. So all of this is not just for the things that we typically think of as organization in terms of school, but this kind of tool also shows you that oftentimes a very simple, practical thing can be the answer to the challenges that you think are very difficult to address. So to be really effective, we need to truly appreciate the student's perspective. So I would like to read to you an essay my daughter recently wrote. As I read this, think about what is possible and what you're doing or could do to make this possible for your student. So I'm going to directly read this essay. As a young person, I suppose it's normal to have a fear of the future. Having a disability made that even scarier for me over the past few years, especially when I started college. This is an essay my daughter wrote just a couple months ago when she's in her senior year of college. From the time I was 14, I was told that I would not accomplish my goals. At that time, the world-renowned neuropsychologist who diagnosed me told me that I would not be able to pass English and math classes or that I would need to graduate. Little did he know that I would graduate fifth in my class of 142 students, despite having taken as many advanced placement courses that I could possibly have taken. I never expected to end up with a full scholarship to SUNY's Honors College and a cumulative GPA on the Dean's List every semester. I work, drive, volunteer as a worship leader and Sunday school teacher at my church, and I'm learning to live on my own. The essay continues, I have learned through the experience that a disability can't hold me back from my academic and life goals. All I needed was hard work, dedication, and commitment on my part, being able to advocate for what I needed and the support of people around me. In the past, I had been told that I was stupid, irresponsible, and likely to fail. Now I'm graduating with a bachelor's degree in social welfare and fully intend to pursue my master's. At first, having a disability made me feel ashamed and guilty. Now it helps me feel passionate about helping people achieve their life goals for the future because of the experiences that I've had. I share this essay with you because it's a testament to what can be achieved with the right supports and opportunities. It's not without challenges, but it's also filled with successes. Now, the reality is that everyone's story is not like my daughter's, and not everyone is going to have the same experiences or results. However, with the right tools and the right people, everyone's challenges can become opportunities to lead to much better outcomes over the long haul for any student. If your student is struggling now, the right supports can decrease that struggle significantly. If your student struggle is minimal now, but you expect that to become more intense once college or career starts, then with the right supports, you can proactively head off those chances of those struggles. And think about how each success can boost self-esteem. The rest of the presentation, we're going to talk to you about the specific services that have had biggest impact for people like my daughter and the other students in our program. So my experience with supporting my daughter and helping her succeed is what has inspired the development of Transitions. Transitions is a supportive apprenticeship for young men and women with the types with ASD and other disabilities who are capable of going to college, but who may need some supports to be successful in college, and who are capable of having a job, but may need some supports to help them through their academic, social, medical, or emotional challenges. I know that there are many teenagers and young adults who can live a life of independence if empowered to do so. That's what Transitions aims to do. But what's really important to you now is not what the program does, but how it does it. So we'll talk about how it does it in the next several slides. No one person, practitioner, or family can do it alone. As a mom, I knew that safety was key. Safety is the whole reason why I didn't push my daughter out into the world to let her sink or swim. So without the safe environment to prepare students, Transitions wouldn't work. So we have partnered with an agency of whom I'm the executive director, is Lexington. It happens to be an organization with a 60-year track record of excellent quality and safety for supports for people with disabilities. The culture at Lexington is centered around a safe, enriched, and nurturing environment for everybody. We needed to carry that through to Transitions. How you will address the safety of your student must be absolutely considered while you prepare the student for the future. Moreover, what is unique about our relationship with Lexington is that Lexington offers a large team of medical and clinical staff who are available to support Transitions apprentices 24/7. That is, again, something you as a family have to think about in supporting your students. You need a team to help you with that. And in the areas that we did not have expertise, we collaborated with internationally acclaimed institutions to provide an evidence-based curriculum that's grounded in research. Our list of collaborators include Virginia Commonwealth University's Autism Center for Excellence, University of California at Los Angeles' famous Peers Clinic, University of Washington and their acclaimed Do It program for students with disabilities, the Sage Colleges, and the Savannah College of Art and Design. You can read more about it at our website, which we'll show you at the end. So earlier I had talked about no one can do this alone. Just like we have collaborated with internationally acclaimed institutions to learn from and provide an evidence-based curriculum, each student needs a network of people to help them who are genuinely aimed at the best interests of the students. Moms and dads, that's you. Clinicians, medical professionals, and educators, that's you too. Having a network alone is not enough. The network has to be allowed to work. The student has to learn and continually build upon their network and how to use that network and work with others as a team. moms and dads and educators and professionals. You have to help the student to move from dependence to interdependence, not necessarily independence. Interdependence is all about having a healthy mutual dependence between people, and it helps students accomplish much more than they would have been able to accomplish if they worked on their own. Just as important, what interdependence does is that it helps the student build relationships, meaningful and deeper relationships, in the process of using their support network. So when you become a parent, an administrator, clinician, or educator, no one hands you a checklist for what every student needs to become an independent adult. So with our collaborators, we identified what the pathway for success looks like for a young adult on the autism spectrum. Shown here on this slide is our version of that pathway, or checklist, if that's easier for you to think of it that way. We call it the evolution of you, and genuinely believe in its ability to live up to that. Essentially, what you're looking at is a detailed order of how 7 specific efforts should be prioritized for students with autism spectrum disorder. The first step is to get to know yourself, to identify your strengths, your challenges, your desires. Once you know yourself, you then turn that into what your goals are and an action plan to fulfill those goals. Now you have a goal plan and you have to learn skills, but you're not going to implement those skills if you don't know how to manage yourself. So learning and implementing self-management skills comes next, because those skills bring the action plan to life. After that, we teach skill building in academics, in career, and independent living. Different settings are necessary to make that happen. Some learning takes place in the classroom, some needs to take place in a home or residence or a dorm, and some needs to be learned in an actual career setting or in the community. One of the areas students on the spectrum have specific difficulty, is in the social skills. So for a sustainable social life, one way we address it is having students learn and develop healthy hobbies, interests, and leisure skills. We actually teach that in our program. Finally, by this time, you have an assessment of yourself, you have a goal and action plan, you've learned self-management skills, you've learned some regular skills in terms of independent living and your academics and your career, and you've learned some leisure skills. The next step is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Students begin putting these skills to work while living independently. We feel that some thoughtful guidance is necessary during this time, whether it comes from mom and dad or whether it comes from a formal program like ours. Either way, the support network I spoke of earlier needs to be alive and well at this point. Self-management needs to be a routine and a reinforced practice as part of the ongoing independent living. At Transitions, much of this is done through coaching. Coaching is provided through college student peer mentors, as well as certified wellness coaches from Mayo Clinic. Of course, we have classroom work and activities that take place in a large variety of settings to achieve as much of a preparatory experience as possible, all while keeping a keen eye on the student's safety. So let's zoom in into the first 2 parts. Knowing your strengths, getting to know yourself, your challenges, and your desires, and turning them into a goal and action plan. We have 2 tools that we use to do that. One is the self-determination scale that's been developed by the ARC. It's a student's self-report measure of self-determination. It helps show strengths and areas of support needed by looking at the areas like autonomy, self-regulation, empowerment, and self-realization. Second is a personal outcome measure interview, which helps determine what matters most to the student and where they would like or feel they need additional support. This tool also helps in goal setting. Looking at the big picture, person-centered planning and the use of personal outcome measures is all about people with disabilities taking control of their lives. And we talk more about it in detail on how to do it in the next seminar. Now, while these two tools are from big organizations and we have been accredited by the organizations and we are trained, parents can also do that at home on an informal basis by going to the websites that have information on how to do that. Next is a bird's eye view of our specific curriculum. 5 core areas are at the heart of our classes. But beyond instruction in a classroom setting, the skills are taught and reinforced through practical application during off-class hours, activities, and skill-building exercises. As we go through here, think about how you might be able to address these areas at home or in your classrooms. First is a big area of self-management. In these classes, students learn how to solve problems, make decisions, and learn strategies for holding themselves accountable. Whereas the class teaches how to be effective at self-management, real-world application of the concepts are practiced throughout the day. Skills like planning, organizing, time management, and managing your schedule support other classes on academic, career, and life skills, and vice versa. Wellness is supported through assigned wellness coaches trained by the Mayo Clinic, who help students set their own wellness, exercise, and nutrition goals, and then provide ongoing student coaching. Students are taught how to cook. They don't need to be gourmet with their cooking, but they do need to know how to feed themselves a healthy diet every day. At the very least, if they're in college, they need to know how to make healthy choices. Other practical skills are taught and put to the test, like doing laundry, planning menus and grocery shopping, money management, and so forth. Like I spoke earlier, social skills are particularly challenging with this group. So we provide relationships training, social skills training, based on a curriculum called Peers from UCLA. Again, you can find more information from our website, which we'll share later. This training program includes areas like meeting people, handling small talk and basic conversation skills, as well as reading verbal and nonverbal cues, teasing and handling feedback. Again, social skills is reinforced both in the classroom and beyond the walls of the program. Leadership and advocacy skills take place both in classroom and in practical experience, and include disability awareness, communication, self-advocacy, and disclosure of strengths. In Virginia, you're fortunate to have the I Am Determined project, which focuses on self-determination and youth with disabilities taking control of their lives. We can't emphasize enough how important it is for students to be able to advocate for themselves. Finally, our curriculum is rounded out by college and career classroom preparation and actual on-site experiences. So, if you think back to the last slide that showed all the areas that a young adult should develop skills in, it is quite overwhelming for any student or parent. We have a team of highly trained professional and paraprofessional staff who do this. During these years, students are also facing tremendous amount of pressure to complete academic requirements of their school, participate in all types of activities because it helps them get into college, sports, community services, et cetera, in addition to these being some of the most difficult years for a teenager. So where does one start and what does one focus on? There are no specific answers to those questions. It's different for each student. While everything on the previous slide is important for any young adult to learn, it is impossible to work on all of these skills at home at the same time. In our experience, we ask families to focus on skills that are outlined first on this chart. These can be done in simple ways during the student's high school years. So let's take the first one. In the area of academics or work, it is important to develop a realistic plan based not just on interests, but also on the strengths and the potential for a college or career, the feasibility of making that happen, and the student's weaknesses. Internships or just having an experience at a job are very good at determining what might be a good match. Post-high school, there's often very little structure. Without a reason to get up, there's often little reason to go to bed. In college, there's no consistent sleep routine. Everything is novel. There's no implicit structure as there is at home. Therefore, it is very important to develop tools and systems that become second nature to the student. And that may be different for each student. I showed you one that my daughter uses, but you could use task lists, a binder system for filing, identifying a specific place for key items, a daily routine, weekly activities, use of a timer, reminders on phones, etc., etc. We'll touch on some of that later on in our third part of our webinar. Self-advocacy and leadership. Perhaps the single biggest change both the student and the family will see is that everyone is now directly talking to the student. Self-advocacy is a skill that will be continually needed and will be needed immediately after the student graduates from high school. The best way to prepare for this is in high school, such as with the I Am Determined project that you have in Virginia. I want to speak a little bit about mobility and personal safety. If you're to teach any independent living skills, these are probably the two areas that are critical to focus on, because the student can't be independent or do things by themselves if they don't know how to get there, and they need to be dependent on their family to bring them there. So whether it's the use of public transportation, whether it's learning how to drive, whether it's learning how to use the transportation system that the college provides, that's a critical area. It's also a critical area to learn to have regular places for things that the student does in their life. So it could be regular places like a doctor's office. It could be a regular place that they go and get their hair cut. It could be a regular place that they go and get a sandwich. Whatever their regular things in life, to find a place, we call that under personal outcome measures, we call that social capital. Develop a relationship at a place for that, whether it's, again, a dentist's office or whatever it is to find that regular place. I also want to speak to personal safety. A critical area that you want to teach your student is to be aware of what they need to ensure their personal safety. And again, we will speak to this more in detail in our third webinar. So the last thing to focus on is now the student is on their own. There's no parent presenting them. It's their personal presentation becomes very important because the student is judged by their appearance. Personal hygiene, appearance, manners, and social graces become important. While it shouldn't be that way, but people do judge you from the outside, so you want to make sure that you're presenting yourself at your best and that that's not something that is holding you back. So socially too, there's no parent to facilitate, so having topics to engage conversation is very helpful. One thing that we have found helpful that we do through our transitions program is a social mentor. This could be a person who's a year or two older than the student, who could be helpful, not teaching social skills, but rather bridging social situations and being a role model to the student. So when we talk, we have a whole webinar focused on independent living skills. And it is very important when you saw the chart of all the skills that need to be taught. But it's important to remember that while it's necessary for everybody to learn all these independent living skills, and we don't want to minimize the focus on medication management and health advocacy and money management and work ethics and all of those things, it's important to remember that the student doesn't have to master those skills to be able to have a good, successful experience in college or at a job. The student, they need to know enough to get by in their next living situation. Remember, the next 2, 3, 4 years, they're still learning those skills, and there's ample time to learn those skills. We have these slides to show you that when you have a student on the autism spectrum, and this is something I found with my daughter, is that we're constantly working on what they need to learn and all the skills that they need to learn. We don't necessarily think about the gifts and talents they have. Students on the spectrum tend to be very creative. It is important to harness that creativity into developing hobbies, interests, and leisure skills. And when they're good at that, because they already have that skill and you're focusing and you're teaching them more, it truly helps them build their strengths, and it's critical to building their self-esteem. 2 of the pictures on these slides are of our band Flame, which comprises of 11 members who have very significant challenges in their lives. Despite these challenging disabilities, they have become a world-renowned band that does 70, 80 performances a year and has been featured in Good Morning America and People magazine. One of the pictures here is of that of Michelle King. She's the lead singer. She was diagnosed with autism at age 3. She hardly spoke at that age, and even for years after. Today, she's the kind of singer that was invited by the family to sing at the private funeral service for Eunice Kennedy Shriver. That says something. Support and opportunity allows for these kinds of miracles to happen, and that's really what we need to do with every student. No matter what their challenge is, we want to make sure that not just to compensate for the negatives they're hearing, but that if they have an interest or talent, we want to develop it. It's a fun way to teach skills because it isn't just about art or music. It is also that through that process, they learn other vital skills, such as executive functioning and social skills and all those other things. Besides, if they have social challenges, it's a way to engage with others who share similar interests. It's a way to find something to talk about. The topics of conversation become about what they're working on, both together and separately, and it creates a social network. To be honest, we cheat a little bit because Transitions, we have chosen to locate it with a creative arts center. And it is for this purpose, so that we can help students develop their talents and gifts, that we chose that particular relationship. Again, if you want to learn more about it, you can go to our website. Finally, you can teach all the skills, but they're not successful until we can practice in natural settings. And it seems like it's easy to say that, of course, we're going to practice. But we tend, when students have disabilities, we tend to do for them rather than with them or with them doing it themselves. So it is important to practice in as many normal settings as you can possibly do. We also, some of the experiences in apartments, in dorms, in a local business, taking, if you don't know whether your student can do college, take one class or audit a class to see if that's possible. Use social scenarios and relationships. Finally, we think that it's important to use technology. Every student should be assessed for technology that may help them. I want to now ask my colleague here, Nancy Desando, to tell you about 2 students that we support.
We'd like to share with you a couple of stories about young adults we support who are very proud of what they have accomplished with some simple supports, one step at a time. Garrett pictured here. He's a young man who enjoys sports and learning about construction. He came from a difficult family life, and as a young man, he spent years in foster care. He struggles sometimes to stay on task, and he can be easily distracted. He may interrupt others, and sometimes when others upset him, it's hard for him to stay calm. At transitions, he lives in a supported apartment with a housemate, and he really wants to live on his own someday. He understands some basics about money, but he needs to learn to handle money and shop better and really budget money. When we interviewed Garrett, he said that what mattered most to him of everything else is his independence, and he wants to be respected and be respectful of others. And if you met him, you would know that he is. He wants some help in getting prepared for and going to college, and in being able to transition to the new apartment. His dreams and goals related to being successful in college and getting a job. Garrett recently talked about what he feels his biggest struggle is, and he would tell you this in his own words. He struggles with time management, and as he attends college, he is also living in an apartment, has a roommate, he has a fiance, he works, and he attends a day program part-time. He works with staff to make daily and weekly lists of what needs to be done that day, such as chores, cooking, shopping, getting ready for the day, doing homework, paying bills, arranging transportation to classes, and ordering and picking up his meds, and everything else that a life entails. He uses a calendar and either paper or his cell phone to record appointments and important events. He works with staff to prioritize tasks and to ensure that he does the highest priority ones first. When Garrett does lose focus, staff remind him what to work on first, and they help him to know what tasks can wait. He trusts his coaching staff to help him to stay on track. He says that attending college part-time works better for him because that way he doesn't become overwhelmed. He does his homework in the library on campus so he can stay focused. He says Sarah, his staff in the supported apartment, helps him with his schedule and in buying books and in handling financial aid, which is daunting to all of us. Garrett is really proud of his planning and his stress management. He uses his planning skills to organize his marriage to his fiancée, which is scheduled to happen in about 2 years. Pretty exciting. He has investigated what he needs to do regarding things like services and supports, things that may change a little bit if he is married and when he moves. Garrett is currently a student at Fulton Montgomery Community College, and he plans to transfer to SUNY Delhi in New York State to obtain a bachelor's degree in construction management. He also has an internship in a local business office. Here's another young lady that we work with, and her name is Jocelyn. She's a young lady with a great personality, a great sense of humor. She's funny as heck, and she has a very good work ethic. But she does sometimes struggle with things like anxiety, self-care, and completing tasks. She wants to learn to be independent in handling things like her medications, her medical care, shopping, working, and living on her own. She struggles socially because sometimes she interrupts others. She may not use appropriate language and manners. She spends too much money, she will tell you, on scratch-off tickets. So she wants to learn to budget her money better so she can use it for other things. In her personal outcome measure interview, she talks about how she values contact with family, having a boyfriend, choosing where she lives, and being independent. She wants to reduce her anxiety because it does get in the way of things that she wants to do, and she wants to handle her health and exercise and relaxation strategies. She'd like to be married and have children someday. Staff support her with learning to manage her medications and her money, with tracking expenses and living within a budget. She's working on things like planning meals, menus, grocery lists, as well as reading labels in the store. She takes exercise classes and yoga to learn to relax. She's learning to use a schedule and a date book, though she struggles to remember sometimes to take them with her. In the peers social skills class that she's taking, she is learning to let others have their turn at talking and to listen to them and to learn to talk appropriately with friends. She has a job coach that helps her on the job and counseling to handle social situations and anxiety.
So this is our last slide, and perhaps the most important one that parents ask. How involved should a parent be? Let's focus on that. Parents will always ask, how do I walk the fine line between empowering and overpowering? As a parent, I will tell you that a caring, involved parent is the strongest asset in a person's life. And in my opinion, this relationship should always be developed and nurtured and maintained. Having said that, I will also tell you that as your child matures and is older and becomes a young adult and an adult, the process here in terms of your role as a parent changes. You become a coach as your student is now a young adult. You no longer give step-by-step direction. You have them do things. You discuss what worked, what didn't work. If they make mistakes, and trust me, they will. We all do. This is not a time to scold or say, I told you so. You'll have to let them fail in little ways. Mistakes are wonderful teachers. Treat them as such. Build up that confidence. Talk about what they did right. Congratulate them when things go well. Ask and let them talk about what they could have done better. Add your thoughts on what they could have done better without being judgmental from the position of maybe it would work better next time if you did this. Be supportive. If they're upset about how something went, let them be. Don't make it better for them because they have to learn to be able to deal with that. And show how it will work out for them next time with just a few minor adjustments. But there's also a part that may be different from what you hear from other professionals or parents. In my opinion, there's a critical part to coaching, and that's safety. Just as a sports coach will ensure stretching and follow the rules to keep players safe, you too have to create as safe an environment as possible for your young adult to develop that experience. For my daughter, as an example, we use an app on our Apple iPhones that lets us know each other's location. Some people think that's extreme, but I know that she's arrived safely when she's driving somewhere she's never been before. Remember, some things that sound like greater control actually create the opportunity for your student or son or daughter to have more autonomy. Because I know she's safe, I can help my daughter push more and more boundaries. She also knows where I am for my safety as I convey to her that we support one another. Ensuring safety can take many different forms for your family. Maybe you send your son to the bank where your sister works so that a friendly face is around if a bank transaction becomes overwhelming. Maybe you rehearse as many details of the transaction as possible in your home before the experience ever happens for real. There's so many ways you can ensure safety while learning. The trick is putting thought into how to execute those ways in many ways. So finally, we've covered a lot of ground today, but we want to continue to be a resource to you as parents, as educators, as clinicians, and so forth. We take what we do very seriously, and helping students to be successful is really all we care about. You have questions? Reach out to us through our website, www.transitionsusa.org. Again, it's www.transitionsusa.org. I also want to mention that there's another resource that we found that might be very helpful to you if you are preparing your son or daughter for college. Even for career, it's very helpful. It's from your own state, University of Virginia, www.goingtocollege.edu. www.2.college.org. Thank you for participating in this webinar. We look forward to having you join us for other webinars, and we wish you and your students all the success in the world. Thank you.